Should you have a prologue for your memoir? Some would say yes, definitely, don't miss the opportunity. Others, no, why bother? Some would say maybe it depends on your memoir, and still others would say never, ever. So we're going to look at what you need to know in order to write a prologue for your memoir. We're going to look at those 4 responses to writing prologue. We're going to look at 3 ways you can write a prologue. We're going to look at how long your prologue should be, and then 3 elements that your prologue needs to answer if you're going to write one. Hello, I'm Brenda. This is Write Your Story, and I'm here to help you to write your memoir. If you haven't seen my first video, which I'm going to link here, as well as in the description below, which tells you more about the differences between prologue, preface, foreword, and introduction, I suggest that you watch that video first. And now we're going to look more depth in this video at prologue. So let's look at that first answer. Yes, definitely. Why would you miss the opportunity? Why would you miss the opportunity to tell the reader more about yourself, to introduce yourself, to tell them why you wrote the book, what's important in it for you, what's at stake for you and the heart of your memoir, and also why it's important for the reader to read it? Why wouldn't you use it as an opportunity to entice them to turn the page and to read a little bit more? Essentially, you're using your prologue to sell the reader on your book, on its merits. Why would you miss the opportunity? They have the front cover to draw them in, they have the back cover to tell them more about the story, and they have the prologue to really cement the deal. So why would you miss this opportunity is what some people would say. Those who say no, why bother, they're thinking nobody reads the prologue anyway. The reader's not interested in you. They don't even know you. If you want to add anything, add something about yourself perhaps at the back. But essentially, the reader's interested in themselves. They're picking up your book to find out more about your story for themselves. They're not interested in who you are. Don't waste the space. Those who say maybe, look really at what sort of memoir are you writing. Perhaps you need to give a little bit more information with regard to your memoir. Perhaps you can enhance the reader's experience if they know a little bit more background or something more about you, but it's really relevant to the memoir, and not every memoir needs one. So be circumspect as to whether your memoir needs one, and only include it if you think that it does. And those who say never ever, well, they just don't see the purpose and the need for it. There really is no need for it. Everybody starts reading the book at chapter 1. Forget the prologue, never ever consider using it. So they're very much in the no camp, but maybe the no camp could be swayed. The never camp is never going to be swayed. So which is the answer for you? Do you think you're a yes, a no, a maybe, or a never ever? For me, I've come to think I'm a yes person. And the reason I'm a yes person is because I always read the prologue. Why wouldn't you? I don't see the reason not to read a prologue. I love to know more about the author. I always read about the author in the cover, you know, when they have that little piece about know the author. I always read it. I want to know the author because I think the author comes out on the page. That's part of the experience. So I'm in the yes camp. I'm in the yes camp to introduce yourself to the reader, to tell them about the heart of your memoir, the heart of your story, why it's important for you think for the reader to read this, what they're going to glean from it, and to really create this rapport with the reader from the start. And essentially, that's what you're going to look at when you write your prologue. You want it to be short, you want it to be purposeful, you want it to be relevant. It is not a self-indulgent aspect. And I think that's where prologue can get no's and nevers, is prologues can often be self-indulgent. It's about me, why I wrote this book, why I want to tell you about it. And even though those are elements we're actually saying should be in your memoir, they're coming from a place of me, not from a place of the reader, not from a place of being succinct, purposeful, and relevant. So that leads me to the next item I want to talk about is how long should your prologue be? And essentially, your prologue should be 1.5 pages on average, 2 to 3 pages if you're doing a type of narrative scene in your prologue. But if you're doing the more traditional preface, don't forget to watch that video, and you're still calling it a prologue, 1.5 pages max. Keep it to a page. Keep it succinct, keep it relevant, purposeful, and keep it engaging. So we're going to look at 3 ways now you can write your prologue. Well, the first way is the traditional preface, and actually it can be called prologue. And so preface, or this traditional way of introducing your book to the reader, is just what we've been talking about it. You write a succinct piece that builds rapport with the reader, tells them a little bit who you are, what the heart is of your story, why you wrote it, and what's relevant for the reader. And you write it in really good, concise language that is engaging. So that is one of the ways you can write your prologue. The other way you write your prologue is to use that narrative technique where you now take a scene, a really enticing scene or a critical scene in your memoir, and you put it right at the beginning of your book, just like in novels, and you let it stand alone as the prologue to entice the reader into reading your book. And there's no explanation, no way of saying anything other than, here's a scene from my book. This is going to tell you a central part of my book, its themes. It's actually going to illustrate for you the real challenge of my book. It's going to entice you to read my book so that you will get to that scene later in my story. And the third way you can write your prologue is a blend of the two. So you can do an introduction to your story, introduce yourself, perhaps what the main theme is of your story and why it's important, do some scene-driven writing, and then finish off with a conclusion. Or you can start with some sort of scene-driven writing and then pull it together with a conclusion and an explanation. So that is a combination really of the first example I gave you and the second example I gave you. In my book, When God Says No, I used the first example. I used the traditional preface where I introduced myself, introduced the theme of grieving, what the grieving situation was for me, what I've learned about dying and how hard it is also for the people who are left behind, and how we can try to start to navigate the grieving process and what I have learned through this. And so in doing that, I also pinpointed questions I asked in this book that I'm going to answer. And that's what I did with my prologue. And I know that it's worked because one of the readers of my book, who's also part of my memoir mentoring group, she commented that when she read all those questions in my prologue, she knew this book was for her because those were questions she was asking herself. So in that regard, my prologue was effective. An example of the memoir that has used that real narrative technique of putting a scene right at the beginning of the book is Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. Jeanette Walls starts her book with a scene that's actually set much further in her book. It's one where she's on her way to a party in a taxi, New York City, in her refinery. She looks out the window and sees her mother scavenging in a dumpster. And her mother is a street person. And this brings up all the emotions in her that she has to grapple with. And she describes that scene. The only explanation she gives at the end of her opening scene is to show us through illustration, through scene-driven writing, the purpose for writing her book. And that is to come to terms with the shame she feels about her parents. But she does it all with scene-driven writing. Now, in her case, she actually didn't call it prologue. She used it as the opening chapter of her book, and she actually gave it a name, and it was part 1 of her book, a short part 1. Part 2 of her book then carries on with her childhood from the time she's 3, and she actually sets her clothes on fire because she has to try and make her own dinner. And then she goes on to part 3 and part 4. And Why I feel that this is her prologue is because it's out of step, out of sequence with the rest of her book. And it's serving that function, but again, she hasn't called it prologue. She set it as her opening chapter. And that is, like I said in my previous video, the joy and the gift of memoir. It is quite a flexible genre, and that's how she's done it. Now, there are two examples that use the blended prologue. One is Educated by Tara Westover, and the other one is Drinking by Caroline Knapp. In Educated, Tara Westover starts off almost with a dreamlike quality in her prologue, which she calls a prologue, describing the scene where she grows up. And from that, she then illustrates a central theme of her memoir, and that is that she didn't go to school. She describes how she's looking out. She sees the school bus go past their farm and it doesn't stop. And that's when she realized that they are different. They don't go to school. She then goes on to explain aspects of her book that she feels it's important for the reader to know. In Drinking, Caroline Knapp starts with an introduction where she explains how important alcohol and drinking was to her. And then she takes us into a scene where she describes being drunk, playing with her friends' daughters, and almost killing them. After she's described that scene, she finishes with a conclusion explaining how she then eventually got onto the road of sobriety. So they have both used a blended prologue, and you can too. You can use any of the three examples I have outlined here. But whichever one you use, make sure it is relevant, purposeful, and short. And make sure it also meets these elements. The one is you want it to build a rapport with the reader. You're using it to introduce yourself to the reader, to show something of who you are and why this memoir was important for you to write. You want to use it to introduce the promise of your book. What is it about your story that you are promising the reader that they don't know at the beginning of the story, but they are going to know at the end of the story? I have a whole video on promise, which I'm going to link as well below, that you should watch on what is the promise of your memoir so that you know what you're offering the reader in your prologue. And then, of course, you need to introduce the central theme of your memoir. You may have more than one theme and sub-themes, but what is the central theme of your memoir? In my prologue, I introduced grieving. In Jeanette Wall's The Glass Castle, she introduced shame and coming to accept her dysfunctional family. In Educated, she introduced the fact that she had no formal education. And in Drinking, well, she introduced her drinking problem. So you're going to introduce the central theme in your prologue. And then you're going to make it super interesting, enticing, and inviting for the reader to read your story. So that's what you need to know about prologue so that you can write the best prologue for your memoir. I'll see you in my next video. If you haven't subscribed and clicked on the notification bell, please do that and reach out to me if you're interested in any of my memoir mentoring courses or my webinars. I will see you otherwise in my next video.